A black girl like you talking back to a police officer. Lieutenant Derek Holloway's tone sounded like poison. Then he delivered a sharp blow with his baton to the 16-year-old girl's head, as if she were less than human. No warrant, no justification, no compassion, just the color of her skin. But what he didn't know was that this teenager, Maya Reeves, wasn't just any student. She was the valedictorian of her class in the entire state of Ohio, the daughter of a former chief inspector of the Internal Affairs Division of the police department, the same man who had dismantled Tactical Unit Bravo 9, a group known for corruption and abuse within the department. The moment her name was mentioned on the radio, the entire police station plunged into panic, like rats fleeing a flood. Now tell me, if it were your son being beaten into a coma simply for being black, would you remain silent? Or would you stand up and break the silence? Don't wait for the blood of someone you love to stain the asphalt before you finally open your eyes. Before we continue this story, please comment on which city or country you are watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. This is just the first twist in a story that will surprise you. The final bell rang through Cleveland Heights High School, reverberating off rusty lockers and worn floors like a countdown to freedom. Students surged down the hallway in noisy waves of laughter, headphones, cell phones, and backpacks clinking against each other. And then, suddenly, the noise ceased. Maya Reeves had just left her last class, her arms crossed over her chest, the hood of her sweatshirt pulled up to her neck. She had only taken 3 steps when she heard the voice behind her, dry, authoritative, laden with arrogance. "Take off your hood, now." She turned around. It was him, Officer Travis Coleman, responsible for school security. Broad shoulders, a clenched jaw, eyes half closed, as if he had already decided the verdict before even hearing the defense. "I'm not disrespecting anyone," Maya said, her voice firm but restrained. "It's just a tank top underneath. I don't feel comfortable." "I gave you a direct order," Travis interrupted, stepping closer. "That's disobedience." Maya's hands gripped the hem of her blouse. "It's not against the uniform. I'm not doing anything wrong." The shove came quickly. Travis pinned her against the locker. The impact echoed down the hallway. The metallic sound of her head hitting the wall sent the air out of the room. Students screamed. Cell phones went up. Trembling fingers began to record. "Hands behind your back," he roared. "Wait, please," she tried to say, choking, her cheeks scraping against the cold floor. The handcuffs snapped shut. Maya didn't react. She didn't scream. She didn't move. But that wasn't enough. The officer took a step back and pulled out his baton. "Now nobody starts with jokes." Too late. The sharp crack of the blow struck the girl's ribs. Maya collapsed like a soundless body. Her knee buckled, her head hit the ground. A hollow sound. And then, the blood. A dark trickle running down his temple, spreading across the white floor like a secret being revealed. "Oh my God, she's bleeding," someone shouted. "Call for help." But the officer did not move. He crouched near the motionless body and murmured, with the same venom in his eyes, "You're just like your mother. All you do is talk. You're good for nothing." Behind him, Deputy Officer Brandon Pierce watched silently, arms crossed, expression cold and distant. No intervention, no alarm. Just a motionless accomplice. Then a woman's cry pierced the air. "She's not breathing!" Panic erupted in the hallway. Students ran, others cried, some filmed, until a woman with a harsh voice, a coordinator or perhaps a police officer, appeared among them. "Cell phones! Hand them over now!" The young people hesitated, but the devices were snatched from their hands amidst the confusion. The recordings disappeared along with their right to tell what they saw. On the other side of town, Diane Reeves was kneeling on the floor of the Cuyahoga County Courthouse, scrubbing the floor with an old rag. The disinfectant burned her cracked hands. She barely noticed the pain. She wiped, took a deep breath, repeated the process. The cell phone vibrated in the apron pocket. A voice message. It rang. The voice was dry, impersonal. "Ma'am, this is University Hospital's Cleveland Medical Center. Your daughter is not responding." The cloth slipped from her fingers. The words echoed in her head like a distant drum. "Your daughter isn't responding." When she walked through the ICU doors, the world no longer made sense. The bright lights, the beeping machines, the cold hum of the air conditioning. Maya was motionless, her face pale, tubes connected to her nose and arms, but it was the red marks on her wrists that told the truth. Deep furrows, marks of handcuffs, not of restraint, but of punishment. Outside, the institutional machine was already running. The official statement read, "The student exhibited aggressive behavior and signs of emotional instability." They said she resisted. They said force was necessary. The phrase "posed a potential security threat" appeared twice in bold. In less than an hour, Cleveland Heights High School sent out an internal memo. It wasn't for the students, nor for the parents. It was for the staff. Avoid making comments or communicating with the outside world about the incident in the central block. Any violation will be treated as a serious offense. The tone was bureaucratic, but the message was clear. Silence. And by morning, the headlines were already written. Teenager hospitalized after altercation at school. Quotation marks around everything. Aggression, injury, brutality, as if the truth were also in parentheses. No mention of the truncheon, no mention of blood. The word responsibility didn't appear anywhere. What made everything worse, what made everything monstrous, was the efficiency. At University Hospital's Cleveland Medical Center, a young nurse, visibly shaken, hesitated when Diane Reeves demanded answers. "You are her mother," I wanted to explain, but I was advised not to speak to third parties. The girl's voice faded until it was lost among the noises of the machines. Third person. That's what they called Diane now. In the room, the beeping of the monitors mingled with a painful silence. Maya remained motionless. Assistant Officer Brandon Pierce did not testify. Officer Travis Coleman did not appear in any news reports, but documents began to surface. Internal memos, written in cold technical language. A report described Maya as someone with unstable behavior in a school environment, potentially putting others at risk. Words carefully chosen to transform guilt into a diagnosis. Words used to justify violence against the unconscious body of a teenage girl. That night, Diane remained seated beside her daughter. The lights in the ICU were too bright, and the air smelled of disinfectant and waiting. Each beep from the heart monitor was like a cruel reminder that time kept passing, but justice did not. The nurses came and went like shadows, avoiding looking her in the eyes. No flowers, no visitors, just her, and the constant sound of the machines. The silence now had weight. Then something changed. A teacher, a middle-aged woman, a familiar face from parent-teacher meetings, passed Diane in the hallway, stopped, and turned back. I said nothing. He placed a folded piece of paper in the palm of his hand and walked on without looking back. The mother opened the note under the cold light of the hallway. The main camera in the hallway was turned off. The backup camera continues recording. 3rd floor, East Wing. No name, no signature, just a dangerous truth hidden in trembling letters. Meanwhile, Officer Travis Coleman was not suspended. It wasn't being investigated. I was being recognized. A confidential document from the Ohio State Board of Public Safety contained the following note. Internal recognition for exemplary handling of an incident involving a student in a risky situation. A few days later, he received funds from the National Operational Enhancement Program. A silent bonus, a disguised reward. They paid him for almost destroying a life. In the room, Diane remained motionless. The hard chairs, the merciless lights, the brown envelope in his hands bearing the government seal. Official matter. She opened it. He read a single line. The procedure was applied in response to a perceived threat with no intention of causing harm. Unintentionally. The word that cleanses everything. The perfect loophole. The problem was never the harm. It was the intent. If they could prove that there was no intent, they could overturn the result. They could call it protocol, a necessary act, or the fulfillment of a duty. But what was happening there wasn't duty. It was violence. No employees showed up, no director, no apologies, no human connection. Just Diane and the cold sound of the machines. Maya was breathing heavily, her fingers curled up as if she were still clinging to something invisible, perhaps life itself. Outside, the system continued as normal. No protests, no interviews, no outrage, just a calculated silence, stretched like isolation tape by all the institutions that should be protecting her. It was organized negligence, transformed into a weapon. Diane didn't cry. Not there, not that night. Her eyes were steady, hard as glass. Something inside her had aligned. A decision, a purpose. She didn't cry for 12 whole hours. She remained there, sculpted into the chair, watching her motionless daughter. Beneath the gauze, a small stain was slowly expanding. She didn't look away. The room, once a scene of tragedy, had become a silent sanctuary. The nurses took turns. The monitors beeped. The clock ticked. Nothing moved inside her, only a growing certainty. At one point, a young doctor approached with a clipboard in his hands. "Ma'am, have you considered taking legal action?" he asked cautiously. The answer came without hesitation. "I'm alive, and I still have both my hands." She stood up slowly. She asked for a sterile compress. She didn't say what it was for. She folded the fabric twice and gently placed it against her daughter's neck, right where the blood had dried on the collar of her apron. The cloth came out with a dark stain, like rust. She folded it again and put it in her pocket. No explanations, no rush. The cell phone remained silent in his palm. But inside her something had awakened. No connections, no alerts, no excuses. Just a soft click when Diane Reeves opened her daughter's voice files on her phone and started scrolling. It wasn't far. Only until I found the clip tagged "Morning of the 14th." She pressed play. Maya's voice sounded light, tired, with that playful tone that mixed weariness and affection. "Physics test tomorrow. Don't forget the banana, Mom. I think better with potassium." A chuckle at the end. Diane heard it once. Then again. He put his cell phone in his back pocket and left the room without saying a word. Meanwhile, Deputy Officer Brandon Pierce, the officer who did nothing, smiled for the TV cameras with his arms crossed and a relaxed face, repeating phrases like "standard procedure" and "action within protocol." Diane did not respond. He didn't argue. She simply walked away, firm, silent, carrying within herself something that the system did not yet know how to name. The security wing of University Hospital's Cleveland Medical Center was located in a corridor that was almost always empty. But she didn't wait for permission. She walked straight ahead, her step firm, the sound of her shoes echoing under the cold lamps. The receptionist looked up. "Do you have an appointment? I'm a mother, and I'm not here looking for comfort." They let her pass. She didn't scream. He didn't beg. He sat down at a metal table under flashing white lights and began to write. Formal complaint form. By hand, line by line, in precise, firm, sharp block letters. In the nature of the complaint section, he wrote, "Handcuff-shaped marks. Punishment applied to a 15-year-old student. No metaphors, no tears, just a fact." That night, sitting at the kitchen table, Diane cut out a headline from the Cleveland Tribune. "Police officer reacted professionally during school incident." The title is in bold. The quotation marks around the words "professionally" and "incident." She stared at the clipping for a long time, then opened a drawer and took out her daughter's old glue stick. She applied glue to the back of the cutout and glued it to the laptop lid. He picked up a red pen and wrote firmly over the headline, "Now you're going to relearn everything from her mother." He closed the laptop with a sharp click, the metallic sound reminiscent of a gun being locked. The following morning, before dawn, she was back at the hospital. Maya remained motionless, her body supported by wires and machines. The monitors blinked at calculated intervals, indifferent to human pain. A young nurse, black uniform, serene gaze, recently graduated, watched from the doorway while Diane meticulously wrote in a leather-bound notebook each medication, each shift change, every temperature variation. "You don't talk much," said the nurse. Diane looked up. "You don't need to," the young woman continued. "People notice. Just you being here is enough." She didn't answer, but something in his eyes changed. The pain was no longer pain, it was calculation. She was building something, not with shouts, but with precision. Each gesture was a straight line, every breath a decision. The system never envisioned anyone like her, not submissive, not destroyed, just methodical, surgical. We had been taught to believe that shouting was a sign of weakness, but I was wrong. Because Diane didn't need to scream. She was becoming the consequence. No formal requests, no confrontations, without authorization. She walked through the gates of Cleveland Heights High School like any other visitor. But the receptionist sensed something about that woman's presence weighed more than any name tag. Diane said nothing. Her eyes spoke for her. I remember everything. The hallway was unchanged. The fluorescent lights were still buzzing. The cabinets displayed old stickers and tape marks. But the air was wrong, too clean, as if they had tried to erase the impossible. The floor glistened with fresh wax. But she knew, not even the strongest product in the world can erase the memory, because trauma sticks where the human eye can't see. She stopped in the middle of the hallway. The tiles were white, cold, and sterile. But no color can mask what is engraved. He did not kneel. He didn't touch anything. He simply observed. Eyes fixed, movements slow, the gaze of a forensic expert. There, near the base of a cabinet, the grout cast a faint shadow, a reddish residue, faded but not forgotten. No product can clean what the system dirties so quietly. She continued walking, her steps measured. Near a stone bench, something caught his attention. A torn piece of orange fabric, sweatshirt fabric, thick cotton, frayed at the edge. The daughter's sweatshirt. She picked it up slowly, folding it carefully and putting it in her coat pocket. A caretaker approached, pushing a bucket. Their eyes met for a second. He turned away, speechless, and took another path. Fear always understands before consciousness. Then she listened. Steps. Heavy, deliberate, the sound of someone used to being feared. Captain Vincent Hartwell was striding down the corridor with the confidence of someone who believes himself to be untouchable. The kind of man who believed that truth was negotiable and that history could be rewritten in archived reports that never saw the light of day. Captain Hartwell slowed his pace as he passed her. His eyes were half closed, a trace of cruel amusement at the corner of his mouth. "Well," he said, leaning slightly forward, his voice thick with suppressed venom, "let's hope your daughter survives." "Not for her. For you. Pain is more interesting when it lasts." Diane Reeves looked up. Her face was impassive. "I still have something you haven't taken from me," he replied, his voice low, firm and sharp. "My memory." He didn't react. He just smiled disdainfully and kept walking. She turned around and walked to the concrete bench in the middle of the hallway. Maya's bench, the same one where her daughter waited when school let her out early, or when she arrived home with her late lunch in a crumpled lunchbox. Diane looked ahead, mentally measuring the distance between the bench and the security camera high on the wall. 6.5 meters. Maybe 7. He opened the notebook, clicked the pen and wrote, "Line of sight from the bank to the east wall camera, unobstructed." He stood up. He walked to the wall. Fingers ran over the cold paint, over the rough cement. It stopped. A cut, narrow, curved, precise, ran through the plaster cast at hip level. It was no accident. She leaned in, observing the detail. The paint cracked at the edges, fine marks of metallic friction. That was no accident. "No student carries a metal baton," he noted. "Who scratched this wall?" She opened the bag and took out an old camera of Maya's, black body, worn strap, clean lens. The girl used it in art class, photographing shadows, colors and reflections. Now it would serve a different purpose. He called. He looked through the lens. He bent down and took the first photo, the baseboard, the corner where the floor meets the wall. Something there still resisted. A dry, faded stain, but with shape. Not a splash, but a spiral. A line that resembled a letter. The letter M. She approached. She took another picture. In the camera's viewfinder, the curve of the line seemed alive, like a whisper coming from the ground itself. Letters don't bleed, he thought. People do. And when the blood dries, it doesn't disappear. He remembers. She too. That night, Diane didn't return to the hospital. Not yet. She went home, not to rest, but to retrieve what the system believed she had forgotten. He knelt on the kitchen floor. He lifted a loose board. Below, an old wooden box, locked with a rusty clasp. She opened it slowly, with hands that already knew the weight of patience. Inside, a yellowed folder full of worn, stapled, stamped papers, archived scars. She started flipping through the pages. At the top, he typed into the computer, "Request for public records, Travis Coleman." He wasn't looking for headlines. I was looking for patterns, and there they were. 4 internal reports, covering 9 years, all marked as no evidence of a crime, all filed by the Internal Affairs Division of the Cleveland Police Department. Each one described the same type of case: young black people, vague accusations, reports closed due to insufficient evidence. She recognized the pattern, the repetition of expressions that sounded too familiar: non-cooperative behavior, moderate use of force, potential risk to the integrity of the team. A broken clock, always showing the same time. A dirty badge, legitimizing violence as routine. Then she found it. A document from 2009, blurred but legible. Signature Inspector Coleman. Subject, female suspect, uncooperative behavior. Diane froze. He remembered. It was a Monday. She was at the Cleveland Greyhound station, waiting for a friend who was bringing her daughter's medication. Maya was 4 years old. She didn't have a car, nor health insurance, just her driver's license and $23 in a plastic bag. 2 plainclothes police officers approached. They said she fit a certain profile. She didn't understand, until the first one nudged her shoulder and she fell. Maya screamed. In the Cleveland Tribune the following day, the headline was a stroke of cynicism. Woman reacts to approach at bus terminal. Below, a grainy image, blurred faces, but she recognized his, the curve of his arm, his body on the ground. He picked up a pen. He emphasized the title. He scratched it out with a firm black line, and he wrote in capital letters, "A police officer squeezed my throat while my daughter watched." He took a deep breath, turned the page. There it was, a small, almost invisible note. "The security footage from the bus station is in our custody and will not be released." And it was there, between the lines of a forgotten public archive, that Diane understood. The city always knew. The difference was that this time she wasn't going to forget. Her palms were flat on the floor, her nails scratching the tile, her body limp but still trying to resist. Diane Reeves recognized the footage even before seeing the date and time. It was her. Even with the low resolution and the colors faded by time, the framing was unmistakable. Her hair was still tied up the same way, her jeans were worn out, and the scream, though silent in the video, still echoed inside her. 15 years later, she downloaded the file. He made 3 copies on encrypted drives, created 3 disposable emails, and sent each one to a different destination, one for the American Civil Liberties Union, another one for the Citizens Police Oversight Committee, and the third goes to Marcus Walsh, an investigative reporter for the Cleveland Tribune. No signature, no trace, only the truth. And then she found the photo. Old, folded, torn at the edges. On the left, she herself, mid-fall, arms outstretched, face twisted with fear. On the right, the man who was pushing her, the badge, the mocking smile. It wasn't Captain Hartwell, it was his father. She turned the photo over. She picked up the pen she used only for important documents and wrote, "Some uniforms create children, others generate legacies." She pinned the photo to the wall, above Maya's hospital forms, and next to the picture of the scratch on the school hallway wall. Now, everything made sense. It wasn't just a police officer. It never had been. It was an inheritance, violence passed down from father to son, as if it were a family heirloom. No one remembered the woman lying on the floor of the Cleveland Greyhound station, but Diane did, and this time she wouldn't forgive. She looked at the photograph, half of her falling, half of her being pushed. The attacker's hand framed by the glint of a metallic ring shaped like a dog's head. It wasn't the reflection of a jewel. It was the reflection of a symbol, a pattern. However, photos alone would not be enough. Not in a country where memory is erased with a click and truth is worth less than a stamp. She opened the iron drawer in the living room. He pulled out an old folder of civil cases covered in old phone bills and receipts. Inside, the vestiges of a past that the system sought to erase, hearings, summonses, arrest records. He opened his laptop and accessed the Cleveland Police Department's website. He typed his own name. Nothing, neither a record nor a hidden file. Nothing but a blank screen, an administrative silence as deafening as the sound of the aggression itself. The following morning, Diane drove to the Cleveland Police Records Division without a lawyer and without an appointment. All you need is your driver's license, your ID, and a printed copy of the Freedom of Information Act. At the reception desk, the employee hesitated. "Do you have a protocol?" "No, I have a memory, and it's more reliable than the system." The attendant swallowed hard. "What year is it?" 2009. My arrest? April 10th, 2nd District, Cleveland Police Department. She typed something, frowned. "There's nothing in the database, ma'am." "I didn't ask for the database," Diane replied. "I requested the physical file." The employee disappeared for 20 minutes. When he returned, he was carrying a cardboard box with 6 folders inside. Diane flipped through them one by one until she found the name typed in firm, worn letters. Reeves, Diane M. She opened it slowly, like someone removing gauze from an old wound. The registration form was yellowed, but intact. And there it was. Officer Travis Coleman, visible signature, firm handwriting. Below, a grainy photo taken from above, probably from the bus station corridor, dated April 10th, 2009. His face pressed against the ground, arms bent behind the back, dislocated shoulder, and a man's hand holding the back of her neck. His ring gleamed. A dog's head, metallic, cruel. She had never forgotten that symbol. Captain Hartwell wore the same type, the same gesture, the same smile. He picked up the pen and wrote on the back of the page, "The police officer who assaulted me is the father of the police officer who assaulted my daughter." But there was more. The transcript of the incident continued, cold, technical, suspect, Diane M. Reeves. Infraction, loitering in a distribution area. Note, the individual resisted restraint through verbal protests. She circled the last sentence and wrote below, "To cry is to resist, because for the system pain has always been an act of disobedience." In the chronology of the dispatch, something stood out. 3:12 p.m., suspect enters the women's restroom. 3:29 p.m., suspect in custody, 17 minutes missing. And at the bottom of the report, a note, recording failure, camera system inactive from 3:13 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. Below is a sequence of familiar names: Inspector Daniels, Lieutenant Marshall, Officer Garrett, Chief Henderson, Clark Bryant, Captain Sullivan. Each name a cog in the same mechanism, each silence a wall built to hide what the country refused to see. At that moment, Diane understood what they had always tried to teach her to forget. Violence in the United States is not a mistake, it's a legacy. And she was about to break it. The same 17 minutes. The exact 17 minutes that Diane Reeves remembered being dragged by the wrist. The daughter is crying in the background. The bathroom doors slammed shut behind two men with badges and no patience. One of them called her trash. That part was never included in the report. She flipped through the medical report, not from the public hospital, but from the Cleveland Police Department's own files. The form was cold, bureaucratic, and full of lies printed in Arial font. Injury, hematoma on the right hand. Cause, fall down the stairs during a chase. There were no stairs. She turned the page and wrote by hand in large, firm letters, "I was handcuffed, not chased. They beat me." And then they lied about how serious it was. The last form paralyzed her. Signature of the supervising officer, Lieutenant Nathan Cross. She knew him. He was now the head of the School Resource Officer Division, the same man responsible for overseeing the officers who patrolled the classrooms, and the same man who had stood by silently in 2009 while she was beaten. He saw. And now he was training them to do the same with his daughter. The pages didn't hurt because they revealed something new. They hurt because they confirmed what she had tried to bury. Diane closed the folder and rested her palm on the cardboard cover, not to hold it, but to feel its weight. His breathing was short and controlled, like that of a diver counting seconds at the bottom of the sea. And then she whispered, in a firm, sharp tone, "This system assumes that poor people have no memory, but I have. And this time, I have proof." The folder felt light, but what she was carrying wasn't paper, it was testimony. As I stepped out into the cold, the rain mingled with the steam from the streets of Cleveland. She didn't use an umbrella. He held the folder against his chest, as if holding an open wound. And as he walked, the thought came, insistent, devastating. It was no longer just about Maya. Never before, not since the moment she saw her daughter's blood on the school tiles. A letter drawn by destiny, a signature the system couldn't erase. Some truths, when exposed, create lungs. And this one was starting to breathe. East Side Coffee House was located on the corner of a forgotten street, the kind of place that seemed to exist outside of time. Peeling walls, fogged windows, the doorbell cracked, but still true to its sound. Diane had chosen that place for a reason. No cameras, no microphones, no eyes of the state, just 4 chairs, a pot of black coffee, and the kind of silence that encourages people to talk. She didn't summon them. She invited them. 3 young people arrived. No parents, no press, no promises, just courage. The first one, a boy of about 17, tense shoulders, restless gaze, the posture of someone who learned too early to hide. He sat down with his backpack still on his back. He didn't take off his coat. Diane served him the coffee anyway. "I didn't think anyone noticed me that day," he said, almost in a whisper. "But I noticed you, Mum." I was 5 years old there at the bus station. The woman was shouting, but it wasn't out of anger. It was fear. For a second, I thought it was my mother. She didn't answer. He simply nodded, with a slight movement of his head. "The lady was on the ground," the boy continued, but she didn't stay still. The silence that followed was not empty. It was crowded, full of memories, of weight, of echo. The second was a girl, perhaps 15 years old. She nervously twisted the drawstring of her sweatshirt between her fingers. The voice came out thin, colorless, like someone speaking to avoid breaking the silence. "Maya." She didn't scream. Everyone says she yelled or fought, but she didn't. She only said one thing. "I heard. I remember it like it was yesterday." Diane tilted her head, her gaze steady. "What did she say?" "My mother won't let me." Silence. Dense, alive. Some words don't need volume to resonate. They just need truth. Diane took a deep breath and looked at the two young people. "Do you want to be remembered for what you said? Or for your silence?" They didn't answer, but nodded. And that was enough. She leaned forward. "So we're going to make sure the world hears how deafening your silence was." The third student did not speak. He was the youngest, perhaps 12 years old, but his tired gaze aged him. He reached into his sleeve and placed something on the table. It wasn't a cell phone, not even a USB drive. Era smartwatch. Diane raised an eyebrow. "Don't press anything," the boy said quickly. "Just listen." She touched the screen once. 3 dry cracks. Then a voice. "Seems." A new snap. And then a voice that froze the air, voiced by Travis Coleman. "Trying the same tear trick your mother used, is that it?" Her heart beat slowly. She was neither arrogant nor angry. It was clinical, like following protocol. Diane stopped the recording. He picked up the notebook and wrote the exact sentence in capital letters, pressing firmly. He put the sheet in a plastic cover and glued a label on by hand. D. Reeves Evidence Record. The younger boy opened his backpack again and took out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a document. It was a drawing. She unfolded it carefully. Crayon marks, intense red. A girl lying in a puddle of paint. The drawing trembled in her hands, but what trembled there was not fear. It was the beginning of something. The truth, at last, had a voice. Beside her, a tall figure, wearing a white shirt, had his arm raised, holding something thin like a twig, the same movement that precedes a blow. Diane Reeves looked at the boy in front of her. His eyes were not moving. He wasn't telling a story. It showed a scar. She folded the drawing and carefully placed it inside the folder, the same one that held the police reports, the old photo of her lying on the floor of the bus station, Maya's hospital records, and the image of the blood on the school tiles. He took a black pen and wrote in firm letters on the label, "Children Who Cannot Remember." I said nothing. It wasn't necessary. That was not testimony. It was a prophecy. The folder remained on the table, closed, but the silence that enveloped her seemed to scream louder than any siren. She didn't open it again. She didn't cry. He simply stood up, snapped his fingers, and went back to work. The truth was no longer the goal. The truth no longer bled. Now came the consequence. The email was sent at 2:14 a.m. No signature, no footer, no traceable headers, no warrant required. The sender appeared with a single name. Nobody's mother. The message was short. Attached are internal misconduct reports from the School Resource Officer Division of Cleveland Heights High School. Pages 47 to 68 require special attention. You'll know when you see them. Not everyone who observes is blind. Consider this a beginning, not a leak. 3 journalists received the material. 2 are from national newsrooms, and 1 is from an independent website, the Citizens Voice Network, which specializes in encrypted whistleblowing and leaks. Within minutes, servers began to wake up, folders, drives, and clouds coming to life. Inside, 137 pages of suppressed reports, filed complaints, omitted interviews, and confidential memos. and a video, a single file, hallway restoration, final EP4 MP4. Duration, 1 minute and 57 seconds. The video began with Captain Hartwell walking down the school hallway like a predator on the hunt. Maya Reeves stood in the center, her sweatshirt still buttoned up, her hands down, her gaze fixed. She didn't say a word. Suddenly, a male voice, Wesley the assistant, ordered, "Double the push, the impact, the baton. 1, 2, 3 blows." The sound that followed was dry, a snap, then screams. The students stood up, some trying to help, others filming before the screen went black. Deputy Officer Brandon Pierce appears in the corner, arms crossed, observing, without intervening, without moving a muscle. But the video that had become public was only a fragment. Diane had found the complete version. Not erased, just buried, resurrected from a secondary server from 2007, forgotten for decades. It is still active thanks to a former IT technician named Raymond Foster. The system was not hacked. It was remembered. By noon, the video had already gone viral. At 3 p.m., the hashtag Justice for Maya was the most talked about topic in the country. But Diane didn't post anything. If you didn't like it, you didn't share it. She simply printed out the first headline from Citizens Voice Network and pinned it to the bulletin board at Cleveland Heights High School. Right next to the blue banner that said, "We keep our community safe." 4 nails, 1 in each corner. Not a word, but everyone understood. Hours later, 3 brown envelopes arrived at the newsrooms that broke the story. Inside each one, a piece of orange sweatshirt, still stained with dried blood, and a note handwritten by Maya before she was hospitalized. "This is how a conscience bleeds." Captain Hartwell's response was swift and cowardly. An anonymous phone call, just breathing at the beginning. Then the threat. "You think you're smart, you tramp. Do you think ghosts don't burn?" Diane did not hesitate. He answered on speakerphone. "At that moment, I was teaching constitutional law at a community college. 30 students stopped, staring at the loudspeaker." She let his voice echo until the end, and then he replied, "That's how cowards talk." One of the students recorded it. The video went viral, again. Days later, a national news network sent an email. "You're being called a vigilante. A modern ghost. The country wants to know who you are." The answer came in a single line. "I'm not here to talk. They are here to listen." The press teams mobilized. News reports attempted to uncover the identity of nobody's mother. Some said she was a former teacher, others a grieving mother, others an infiltrated hacker. But amid the speculation, one news outlet received an anonymous email, no text, just an attachment, a digitized photo. Again, 2009, the bloodied woman. One eye is swollen and closed. The caption for the police system in the lower corner read, "Suspect Diane M. Reeves. Reason, resistance to the approach." The image spread throughout the country. And for the first time, the system had to remember what it had tried to forget. Her name was erased. Only a caption remains at the bottom of the image. She didn't need to be famous. She just needed to be reminded. Diane Reeves never published the video. He never claimed responsibility for the leak. He never gave an interview. And yet, the fire spread. It started in anonymous email inboxes, spread through messaging groups, cafeterias, and class breaks. She moved from screen to screen, cracked, dirty, borrowed, and each click transformed the silence into a chorus. Diane did nothing more than reveal the truth. It was the students who decided what to do with it. They didn't do it for Maya. They did it because they recognized themselves in her silence, because they saw their own future reflected in her blood. On Monday morning, Cleveland Heights High School was no longer a school. It was a settling of accounts. The main corridor, which connected the entrance to the gymnasium, had been transformed into an art gallery made of fury and mourning. Drawings pasted all over the walls. Portraits of Maya Reeves, done in pencil, pen, and charcoal. Some showed her smiling, others fallen on the ground. Below each face, the same caption written in irregular capital letters: "She bled." We watched. No one had asked for permission. The students entered wearing orange sweatshirts, in homage to Maya, and white armbands, representing the silence they had carried until then. At precisely 10:17 a.m., more than 200 young people fell to the ground at the same time, backpacks left lying around, arms outstretched, eyes closed. 3 minutes, no sound. 5 minutes later, Assistant Officer Brandon Pierce appeared. Hard face, heavy steps. He walked down the hallway like someone carrying ghosts on his shoulders. The students rose slowly as he approached, not to face him, but to move away. They made way, not out of respect, but out of repulsion. Pierce stopped. He looked around. And for the first time, there was no power whatsoever in the shoulders of the uniform. Outside the iron gate, Diane watched. She didn't need to go in. The flame had already been passed. In her hands, Maya's old canvas backpack, worn out, with a broken zipper. She hung it on the fence, high enough for everyone to see it. I said nothing. He didn't move until someone noticed. Then he turned around and mingled with the crowd. From inside the courtyard, a voice rose. A student, microphone in hand, on the last step of the main building. Her voice trembled, but remained firm. "This is not a protest. It's the day we reclaim our memory." More young people joined. Principal Kenneth Whitmore ordered the doors to be locked. It was no use. They didn't need classrooms. The courtyard was the new courthouse. A girl stood up, holding a cardboard sign still dripping with black ink. "We're not going to class because the school trained the police officer who killed our classmate." Nobody argued. Nobody needed that. When Officer Travis Coleman tried to enter through the back, his hood covering his face, a 16-year-old boy recognized him and shouted, "You are not a man. It's just a big body without a soul." The crowd did not applaud. It didn't move forward. He just remained silent. And Travis, the man who thought he controlled fear, turned his back and walked away. Later that day, Diane found a letter in the community's mailbox. Handwritten, unsigned, just 5 words. "We are with you now." She folded the ticket and put it in her coat pocket. He walked to the side of the school, where students were writing the names of victims of police violence in chalk. The wall was already full. Then she turned to the whiteboard fixed to the main window, picked up a marker and wrote, "I am not your leader. I am merely a shadow behind my children." Then she walked away. She didn't cry, but the silence now belonged to them. Diane didn't cry when she saw the images. She didn't cry when the police called to threaten her, not even when he saw Maya's name among the most talked about topics, alongside the word justice, treated as an award. But when the envelope arrived, thin, sealed, with no return address, her hands hesitated. Inside it, the past. Not in metaphors, in ink. It was a complete digitalization of his 2009 arrest proceedings without any cuts. A dossier from an independent investigator, unsigned, but who knew exactly what she was looking for. The pages contained the original chain of custody, the badge number, and the actual handwriting. And at the bottom, stamped with blue pen and that unmistakable slant, was the name she never forgot. Officer Gerald Hartwell. The man who pushed her face against the ground in front of her daughter. The man who told her to shut up, as if she were just some random suspect. The man who disappeared into retirement, praised for decades of exemplary service. Now the truth was no longer hers. It was public, irreversible. Long live. Now he was back. I'm not alive, not present, but resurrected in the gestures of his own son. Not by coincidence, by doctrine. The more Diane Reeves investigated, the more the pattern revealed itself. Officer Gerald Hartwell was not just another retired police officer. He had headed the Urban Containment Task Force of the 3rd District, a squad created under the pretext of preventing community conflicts. In practice, it was a troop trained to repress young black people from peripheral neighborhoods, almost always unarmed, almost always referred to as hostile suspects. In a digitized video from 2017, hidden on an old Cleveland City Hall server, Gerald appeared at the head of the table, facing a team of attentive uniformed officers. Behind him, on a whiteboard, a phrase was written in bold blue letters: "Discipline is taught through pain." His voice sounded aged yet confident. "You get it right once, they remember it forever." Diane closed the laptop. He took a deep breath, and he reopened it. On the screen, a photo from 2023, Captain Vincent Hartwell with his baton raised over Maya. Next to it, the image from 2009, Officer Gerald with his arm raised, the same movement, the same angle, the same brutality. She overlapped the two. Identical, not inspired, instructive. 2 different decades, 2 different bodies, the same inheritance. The same violence taught, practiced, celebrated. She murmured almost voicelessly, "Sin never dies. It multiplies. He has children. Dress them in uniform and give them weapons." On an old, still active private Facebook account, Diane found a photo, Gerald, the younger one, next to his son, Vincent, 7 years old, holding a wooden stick and smiling. In the caption, the father had written, "Following in their footsteps." The children have already understood what strength is. She didn't download the image. It printed. In the leaked document that had already been circulating in the press, a forgotten excerpt from a promotion memo was now gaining new weight. Candidate Captain Hartwell was promoted in recognition of his legacy. Demonstrates consistent disciplinary instincts and tactical excellence. Legacy. The word sounded like a curse, and buried among the footnotes was another revelation. Deputy Officer Brandon Pierce, the silent observer who watched Maya fall, had been a direct disciple of Gerald Hartwell. A photo from 1998, retrieved from a defunct police forum, showed the two, Gerald and Pierce, side by side in uniform. Below is a comment signed by Pierce. "The officer taught me not to back down just because they cry. We're not here to receive pity. We're here to win. Everything fit together." Diane placed the 2 images side by side, Gerald above her in 2009, Vincent above Maya in 2023. Same arm, same ring on the finger, same gesture, same lineage. She took a black pen and wrote on the cover of the new brown folder, "When justice is not inherited, evil takes its place," and he sent 6 copies to different newsrooms. Then he waited, not for answers, for consequences. The silence didn't last. The door opened like a crack in a ravine under pressure, and the truth emerged, slowly, steadily, impossible to stop. Less than 12 hours after the last envelope arrived, the Civilian Police Oversight Commission convened an emergency session. The official statement was short, bureaucratic, and yet devastating. New evidence justifies the immediate reopening of previously closed cases involving Captain Hartwell and Officer Pierce. Both are suspended pending the end of the investigation. The headlines dominated the country, but Diane didn't read them. I was in the kitchen, standing in front of the corkboard that covered the wall. Using a thumbtack, he attached the printed cover of a 312-page dossier, the title handwritten in black, "The Timeline of Rubber." No preface, no dedication, no room for dispute. A scalpel piercing the flesh of bureaucracy. Each page contained a date, a time, and a wound. 73 incidents. 71 involving black or mixed-race students. 36 with improper use of force. 17 camera malfunctions. 3 children dead. And a system that coldly repeated, "We followed the procedure." Captain Hartwell refused to appear for questioning. He cited mental suffering and a hostile public environment. His lawyer called the case a media lynching. The official statement, read by a press officer, sounded as cold as it was predictable. This officer served with distinction and is being unfairly defamed for performing his duty under extreme circumstances. Diane did not respond with any public statements. He did not give any interviews. He didn't record any videos. She simply sent a black box, and within it, what the system fears most: evidence, dates, and silence. He arrived at the Civilian Police Oversight Commission headquarters on a grey Thursday morning. No ticket inside the box, just a set of archival photographs and a brown folder labelled Maya Reeves, 8 p.m., March 3rd. On the outside, a single sentence written by hand in red marker: "We make no apologies for remembering so clearly." The photos did not show any blood, no screaming, just wide eyes, the instant before impact, the terror caught between what is human and what the system calls procedure. In one of them, Assistant Officer Brandon Pierce appears in profile, arms crossed, a forced smile, while Maya, huddled against the tile, struggled to breathe. In another shot, Captain Hartwell's boot enters the frame 3 seconds before the camera cuts to still image. The commission digitized the material and uploaded it to a restricted portal, but the leak began before the protocol was completed. A junior employee at the Ohio Department of Education, disturbed by the brutality of the dossier, anonymously sent the files to the National Forum on Educational Equity. As night fell, one expression dominated the networks: erased by policy. Then came the final blow. A statistical analysis hidden in the appendix of Diane's report, proving that more than 70% of forced removals in public schools involved black or marginalized children. Deputy Officer Brandon Pierce broke the silence. Facing the cameras, his face hardened behind the state flag, he declared, "We are reviewing our procedures." But it's dangerous to let sentimentality override discipline. We followed the rules. The following morning, the gate to his house in the Shaker Heights neighborhood was covered in mud. A page torn from Diane's report was taped to the fence, with a phrase circled in red: "Memory does not obey decrees." Below, a poster made by a student read, "The cameras stopped. We didn't." Meanwhile, Captain Hartwell's lawyer released a new press statement, full of sarcasm. "It seems that due process is now decided by hashtags and manufactured commotions. My client will not participate in a mass trial." Diane did not respond. It wasn't necessary. That same night, she sent one last envelope addressed to the newsrooms that had ignored her daughter's name. Inside, a laminated page from Maya Reeves's medical record listing her injuries: laceration above the temple, contusion on the left jaw, deep abrasions on the wrists. Next to it, a handwritten post-it note: "It's not hysteria. It's proof." The next day, Diane walked alone to Cleveland Heights High School. The footsteps echoed off the tiles, the sound of a woman who would never be silenced again. She stopped in front of the employee's notice board and posted a single newspaper headline: "School violence under investigation." Below, he wrote in black marker, "Too late to ask what happened. You saw it." Hours later, a spokesperson for the Cleveland Police Department was caught off guard during a live interview. Without a script, he responded with what he considered firmness: "They want us to apologize. They think we're going to kneel down." But it went viral, and not in their favor. Parents and students filled the comments section. "We don't want excuses. We want them to stop hiding the truth behind their uniform." While the rain fell on the city, Diane was at home, scanning each page of her notebook. He made copies. I created backups. He kept them under pseudonyms. She didn't trust the internet. He trusted his memory, and in that war, memory ceased to be a burden. It became a weapon. When a local journalist tried to call the movement revenge, she responded with a single photograph. Maya, at 6 years old, smiling and holding a sign drawn in crayon that read, "My mother is not wrong. She just arrived earlier." The article was never published. That night, an anonymous package was left at the reception desk of the Cleveland Police 2nd District Station. Inside, a flash drive and a folded photograph showed Officer Gerald Hartwell dragging Diane down a hallway, her face obscured by her hair. The file had a simple name: Heritage. When reporters asked Diane Reeves what she expected from all of this, she replied in a firm voice, a calm and unbreakable gaze, "I don't need them to apologize. I need them to acknowledge the legacy they left behind. No tears, no speeches, just 312 pages of evidence, a black box, and a sentence etched into the conscience of a city we remember and we refuse to politely forget." The city never slept. But Diane wasn't driven by anger. She was driven by precision. Where the state hesitated, she advanced. Where institutions hid, she opened cracks and let in the light, because only someone who has bled to death knows exactly where the bones are buried. Diane Reeves filed 5 separate complaints, one for each organ that, in theory, should protect what the system has destroyed. Ohio Department of Education, Cleveland Police Internal Affairs Bureau, Ohio Civil Rights Commission, Public Integrity and Conduct Board, School Transparency, Ombudsman Office. Each envelope contained different pieces of evidence: emails with redacted sections, audio recordings with dates and timestamps, handwritten transcripts and internal memos with comments in red. Diane didn't file complaints. She was opening arteries. He didn't shoot at the top of the pyramid. It broke the backbone of the system. Within 72 hours, 3 senior officials resigned. The statements were bureaucratic, full of personal motives, but the timing gave everything away. The first was the Undersecretary of Education, the man who had authorized the appointment of Deputy Officer Pierce, even after previous allegations of abuse of power. The second, the civilian coordinator of school policing, is the one who once signed off on the removal of cameras from Cleveland Heights High School under the pretext of budgetary adjustment. The third, an operational sub-chief, was known behind the scenes for burying reports and silencing anyone who dared to report irregularities. Their departures were not confessions, they were escapes. CNN aired a report with an almost solemn tone. The mother who took down 3 agencies without a badge. The black and white image of Diane, accompanied by the symbol of Chiron, came with the caption, "She used memory as a weapon." Captain Hartwell, stunned, called her for the first time since the attack. Her voice trembled, her tone somewhere between anger and fear. "You have no authority, no position, no badge, no rights." Diane responded after a pause, "I don't need a right. I have a reason." And he hung up. She knew, silence sometimes screams louder than any microphone. The following morning, he received an anonymous fax. In the header, a supposed law firm that did not exist, threatening her with a lawsuit for defamation and slander. Diane scanned the document. He posted the image on his page and wrote in red letters at the top, "Comedy of a menacing level." The post went viral. The students started wearing brooches with that phrase, a trophy of irony, a scream disguised as laughter. Then came Pierce's breakdown. A journalism student, while browsing the school servers, found files that had been formatted only partially. Inside them, falsified disciplinary records, dates switched, accusations fabricated, grotesque duplications. One, from 5 years earlier, showed a student who was falsely accused and later acquitted in court. The signature at the bottom, Officer Brandon Pierce, verified, confirmed. Diane printed the document and attached it to the main file. Soon after, she met with a lawyer specializing in civil law. not to process the information, but to trigger a rare maneuver. A legal motion for forensic recovery of deleted data. A request to exhume the truth from within the machinery of the state. 2 weeks later, a judge granted a conditional preservation order. The administrative building at Cleveland Heights High School was sealed off for forensic examination. Diane watched from across the street, arms crossed, gaze fixed as the police sealed the doors. She entered the place as a mother and left as a living denunciation. She didn't smile. He took a picture. The following day, the Cleveland Tribune printed the headline, "She went in alone. The walls are falling down now." The broadcasters started calling her by a new title. She didn't ask for him, but it spread. The mother who knew where the bones were buried. When a young reporter asked her if she felt victorious, Diane responded with surgical calm. "This is not a victory. This is an exhibition. They hid behind the law as if it were armor. I passed through like smoke. Now they see what they were trying to hide." In the following days, the Internal Affairs Bureau opened a retroactive audit covering 6 years. More than a dozen school employees were questioned. Diane did not show up. He left only one folder in the waiting room. Inside, suggestions for questions. She didn't tell people what they should say. It only reminded them of what they had seen. He didn't cite any laws. He cited dates. He did not cite any case law. He mentioned names, and with each door that closed, she left a record, not in spray paint but in documentation, a trail of paper impossible to shred. When the third agency published its apology, Diane was already home, seated at the kitchen table, updating your file's index. On the first page, he wrote in centered letters, "They used policies to erase children. I used memory to resurrect them." And when her inbox was flooded with invitations, interviews and awards, she answered only once, a yellow post-it note stuck to the computer screen. "The goal is not to be seen. The goal is to make them see." The room at the Cuyahoga County Courthouse was colder than expected. The fluorescent light turned faces into shades of gray, a perfect portrait of the neutrality the system pretended to have. Diane Reeves remained motionless, straight spine, hands intertwined. No notes. She didn't need to. The truth doesn't need a script. The gallery was packed. Journalists, students, former professors, off-duty police officers, and ordinary citizens. They were not there merely for justice, but to witness the moment when the truth would be spoken aloud. In the center, like someone walking back towards their own fire, Captain Hartwell climbed onto the platform with his jaw clenched and the arrogance of someone who believes his uniform is a shield, even off-duty. That morning, he wasn't wearing his uniform. I use the term, a dark suit and a childlike belief in one's own impunity. He cleared his throat, his voice dry. I didn't attack her because she was black. I hit her because she looked at me the way her mother looked at me. The same eyes, the same affront. The coup didn't come with shouts, but with silence, the kind of silence that weighs more than any sentence. Diane stood up, without haste, without anger. "Would you mind repeating that to my daughter when she wakes up?" Hartwell did not hesitate. "I would repeat it because it's true." A lawyer for the prosecution interrupted him. "And what did you see when you hit her?" Hartwell blinked. "I saw something that needed to be eradicated." The screen behind him shook. The video has started, granulated, cold, 3 blows with a baton, 3 synchronized words. "You are like her." Diane didn't look at the video. She looked at him. "I didn't give birth to a copy. I gave birth to a mirror that you can't face." The judge did not intervene. The audience didn't move. Time stood still. Then, from the back of the gallery, a boy of 12, maybe 13, stood up. He was carrying a toy stick in his hands. He walked up to the witness gate and asked, "Do you want to hit me too?" The court did not react with shouting. It froze. Hartwell did not respond. It didn't move. His gaze wandered. Judge, audience, cameras. Nothing. Later, a reporter wrote, "That boy didn't ask for protection. He offered confrontation." A lawyer leaned toward the head of the corporation seated in the back. "Did you know that Captain Hartwell's father had previously arrested the victim's mother under the same circumstances?" The boss pursed his lips. "That's not part of this case." But a voice in the gallery replied, "Oh yes, it does. You don't inherit uniforms. You inherit the silence," and he taught him how to use both. Hartwell's eyes gleamed. Anger, fear, perhaps pride. He finally turned to the cameras and said, "If I could go back, I would do it again. I would hit her again." The entire room contracted. Diane didn't blink. "Excellent. Then I'll be back too. And this time, I won't be in handcuffs." The phrase echoed through the courtroom like a silent thunderclap. It didn't need a soundtrack. No need for hashtags. He didn't need anything. Within minutes, a 5-second clip filled the country's screens. Presenters quoted. Activists replied. Billboards in 3 cities displayed only one sentence about cracked bricks. "This time, I won't be in handcuffs." Outside the courthouse, there were no shouts. There was silence. Hundreds of people side by side, holding simple signs. A stick broken in half. No verdict was read that day, no sentence, but the country understood. That night, Diane went home. The balcony was covered in messages written in chalk. She spoke for all of us. He showed them who they really are. 1 stick. 3 blows. Infinite echoes. She walked past the sentences, unlocked the door and hung up her coat. He sat down, opened his notebook and wrote, "Cowards always bring weapons to fight against memory." That's how they lose. Cowards fall quickly, but accomplices rot slowly, while the machine silently fell apart. No sirens, no triumphant headlines. The emails disappeared. The statements were retracted, and faces hidden behind codes of conduct were forced to face the light. The system did not collapse. It has been revealed. Days later, Deputy Officer Brandon Pierce was subpoenaed by the Civilian Police Oversight Commission, the same organization that had previously praised him. He appeared alone, without a lawyer. Grey suit, 2 sizes too big. When asked if he wanted to comment, he shook his head. No comment. He never returned to Cleveland Heights High School. Diane didn't either. It wasn't necessary. She had already turned the school floor into living proof. Instead of speaking, Diane Reeves sent 4 letters to the Ohio Department of Education. Letters that should never have been forgotten. Copies of 8 years of internal complaints written by teachers at Cleveland Heights High School, each detailing physical assaults committed by Assistant Officer Pierce, verbal threats, and silent removal of official reports from school archives. One of them ended with a scribbled line, almost a muffled scream. "If they're not going to fire him, at least don't let him near the freshmen." Days later, a brown envelope arrived, with no return address or delivery stamp. Inside, a handwritten note from a white student. Diane didn't know her. The girl had never spoken in public. On paper, a single sentence, simple, raw. "He once told me, these kids are good at hurting themselves. They know how to make the situation worse. That's what they do." Diane read the note once, then another one, and he filed it on page 48 of the new volume of his personal archive. Title, Echoes of Intention. The following day, a human resources employee from the Department of Education made a public statement. Her voice trembled, tears visible just beneath her professional tone. "We haven't done enough. I didn't do enough, and I'm sorry." They asked Diane for a comment. She didn't give any. Hours later, a quote appeared pasted on the school hallway bulletin board. "I don't need your apology. I need you to understand who I am without the badge." Meanwhile, retribution was running along unseen paths. 3 journalists who had written articles mocking Diane Reeves's emotional crusade. They were excluded from press conferences. Students cancelled interviews. Professors retracted old quotes. One of them tweeted, "No one talks to me anymore." And someone replied, "Now you know what silence sounds like when it has been earned." The following week, the server room at Cleveland Heights High School was sealed off by an independent forensic team. In compliance with a court order to recover deleted data, what they found was devastating. Hundreds of deleted messages, tampered metadata, destroyed backups. But nothing really disappears. Emails resurfaced, discussions about blind spots in cameras, spreadsheets with target demographic data, and records of coordinated interruptions. A few days later, an anonymous letter arrived at Diane's house. No signature, no label. The handwriting is shaky but firm. "I trained with Officer Gerald Hartwell. He taught me how to strike without consequences. I regret listening." Diane placed the letter between 2 documents. One is about stick-fighting technique, and the other is about wound treatment. At the top, he wrote the title of the new section, "Regret Doesn't Disappear." Weeks later, during a closed faculty meeting, a middle-aged white professor stood up. He cleared his throat, his face pale, his hands sweating. "I laughed when I first heard about her back in 2009. I thought that was an exaggeration. Now I can't sleep." The silence fell like a stone. Nobody applauded. At the back of the room, Diane looked up. His voice came out low, like a sentence. "I won't stop. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to wake them up." The phrase resonated louder than any applause. From that day on, the meetings began in silence. Not out of respect, but out of conscience. The corridors have changed. Motivational posters have been replaced by timelines. The students' work began to be organized by year, not by theme. And in every exhibition, there was a piece without an explanation. A silhouette, a stick, an overturned chair. Deputy Officer Pierce's office remained locked. Dust had accumulated on the frosted glass. No replacement has been announced. For the first time, the school was operating without a security officer, because there, leading had become dangerous. Outside, Diane's face began to emerge. Painted on walls, scribbled in notebooks, projected onto canvases, not as a martyr, but for the record. In all the pictures, she never smiled, because true justice doesn't smile. She remains. And when they asked him, "Do you feel vindicated?" she always replied, "Ask them." I wasn't the one who changed. The dust had not yet settled in the empty office, but Diane was moving again, not with paper, but with steel and light. He arrived at Cleveland Heights High School before dawn, accompanied by 2 volunteers and an electrician. At noon, a digital panel 30 centimeters wide, it was fixed to the wall of the longest hallway in the school. Under shatterproof glass, 12 names pulsed one by one. Name, age, date of arrest, no adjectives, no verdicts, just facts. In the center, imposing above all other names, was that of Maya Reeves. The image, not of the hospital, but of an old, colorful, vibrant school project, it was accompanied by a simple caption in white letters. She studied here. She bled here. The hallway was never silent again. Students gathered in front of the panel, some in groups, others alone. Some only touched the glass, as if they could feel the names they were previously afraid to pronounce. A newly arrived boy whispered, "I didn't know they kept records." Another replied, "They did keep them, yes. Now we keep them too." A journalist from the Cleveland Tribune wrote the phrase that resonated throughout the country. She didn't build a memorial. She created a newsletter about violence. Social media has transformed this idea into a national movement. The hallway at Cleveland Heights High School is no longer a school space. It became known everywhere as Justice Hall. When Diane Reeves was asked what that meant, she answered without hesitation, firm as always, "I didn't carve my daughter's name in stone. I slapped the man who destroyed it in the face." A week later, a former student, who had dropped out of school 2 years earlier, after being knocked down by a security guard, he appeared at the end of the corridor. He didn't say a word. He simply stood there, standing before the name that corresponded to his own. His eyes were fixed on the screen displaying the video on a loop. A teacher approached, stopped and whispered, "Welcome back." Soon the parents started arriving. Not all at once, not with signs, but with blank sheets of paper in hand, each with the same phrase written in pen, "Me too." They pasted their pages under the names that shone on the panel. 12 leaves turned into 20. 20 became 40. Soon the entire hallway was covered in memories. White on glass. The truth about silence. 3 days later, a local police officer arrived at the school with orders to remove the unauthorized installation. At the entrance, he was greeted by students arm in arm. Nobody screamed, nobody ran. They just stood there. Diane was already there. The police officer stared at her, irritated. "Ma'am, this violates department regulations." She took a step forward, calm as erosion. "Then you'll have to erase the memory of this entire city, because this is no longer a wall. It's a mirror." The police officer hesitated. She added, "And if you want to bring him down, you'll have to bring them all down together." He turned around. The order was never carried out. The next day, the phrase that Diane said in that hallway, it was printed in newspapers, spray-painted on walls, pasted on buses, written on the asphalt of public squares. "If you want to tear down the wall, you're going to have to dismantle the memory." This phrase became the motto of the largest civil campaign led by young people in the history of the state. The marches began, not with shouts, but with names being read aloud. The students gathered not to protest, but to document. The truth was not shouted. It was read. Be careful. Diane never stood on a political platform. He never raised his fist. But as I walked through Justice Hall, past the photos, by the names, by the children's drawings, the students walked away in silence. Some nodded in agreement, others lowered their eyes, not out of fear, but for recognition. Weeks later, at a community forum on education and safety, the new interim superintendent asked, "How can we restore trust?" A girl in the last row replied, "Start by reading what's written on the wall. Then ask who put the names there." Diane was outside the auditorium. He didn't go in. He didn't interrupt. He simply wrote something on a yellow piece of paper, folded it, and stuck it to the janitor's door. The note said, "Trust isn't built by cleaning up blood. It builds itself by acknowledging its origin." Inside, the air conditioning was humming. Nobody said anything. This is why truth takes root in a system built on dust. She doesn't scream. Lay bricks. And just as dust turned into memory, Diane transformed memory into justice. She did not hold any press conferences. He didn't bring any cameras. He entered with names. 12 names, united in a civil action filed in the Cuyahoga County Courthouse under the title Reeves versus Hartwell. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't compensation. There was no financial request. The only requirement was devastatingly simple, mandatory public testimony, read aloud, every word. The police union's legal team tried to block it. He filed a motion to dismiss the case, alleging procedural abuse, media influence, and emotional manipulation. The judge read the request. Looking at the images already attached to the case file, he denied it in less than 5 minutes. The hearing began without any voices. Just one screen. 5 seconds. I am here. Maya Reeves falling. 3 blows. The body bending like paper in the wind. The room was still. Diane stood up and walked to the platform. In his hand, not a Bible, not a speech, but an old notebook, full of smeared ink and bent corners. She placed it on the witness table. I swear, not by the truth as defined by law, but because of the truth I've lived. I swear on my memory. No one interrupted her. Nobody moved, because what followed was not testimony. It was a revelation. She opened the notebook. On a marked page, "It's a lion." February 17th, 2009. I was dragged out of the women's restroom at the Cleveland Greyhound station by a police officer named Gerald Hartwell. He didn't use his voice. He used a baton, and he said, "I fit into a pattern." The hematoma did not disappear for 3 weeks. My daughter saw it. She was 6 years old. Every sentence spoken by Diane Reeves sounded like a precise blow, shattering the fragile shield of the institution. A court artist later said she was unable to draw during the testimony. He just stood there staring, motionless, like someone witnessing something that can't be contained within a frame. Later, Diane's lawyer presented an anonymous statement from an active duty police officer. The paper trembled in his hands. At the top, a phrase etched like a scar. Captain Hartwell once said, "My father instilled fear in them. I'm just making sure that this continues in the DNA." The room was silent for 30 seconds. Then the lights went out. When they returned, the scene had changed. A reconstructed classroom, a perfect replica of Maya Reeves' classroom. It occupied the center of the courtroom. The students reenacted the stories. Maya, not runner. The order to take off the sweatshirt, the refusal, the force. The air grew heavy. The judge took off his glasses. The rain outside has stopped. Diane stood up again. I promised myself I would never set foot in that room again. But this time, I can speak inside it. She turned the page of the notebook. He read aloud, "Captain Hartwell told me, you raise your daughters to be sassy." She then showed the notebook to everyone. Written in firm letters was the answer. She answered because I taught her how to speak. What followed was not a debate, it was a surrender. The defense was unable to refute the times. He was unable to refute the recordings. He couldn't erase the evidence. The lawyers stood there, paralyzed by their own silence. The suits, once shields, now looked like crumpled paper. The judge asked, "Do you have anything else to add?" Diane placed the notebook on the table. "No, everything has already been said. You just didn't listen." 10 seconds of silence passed, not for dramatic reasons. Out of fear of being the first to breathe, a journalist was crying, another was typing without looking. When the session ended, the system did not crash. He did not confess. It did what all broken machines do when they are exposed. He stopped, calculated, and looked away, but it was too late. The screen had shown Maya's body falling. The court had heard the mother's voice, and a space created to bury shame ended up exposing it to the sun. The verdict was unnecessary. Everything that needed to be seen had already been seen. Everything that needed to be said was already engraved on the walls of justice. And when the dust settled, the first thing to fall wasn't a system, it was a distinctive mark. Captain Vincent Hartwell was dismissed without pension, without severance pay, without honors. The document was direct, cold and impersonal. Permanent revocation of service, disqualified for any public security position. But the phrase that hurt the most wasn't in bold. It was in plain text. He is no longer a representative of this department. When he found out, he tried to call his father. 4 taps, P.O. box, he tried again. Nothing. The silence weighed more than the sentence. But Officer Gerald Hartwell did not remain silent for long. Days later, he appeared live on the Ohio News Network. Impeccable suit, dry tone, sharp words. He is not me. Let that be clear. I wore the uniform because I knew what not to say. He wore it because he needed something to express what he thought. I knew when to shut up. He didn't know when to drop the baton. People ask if I trained him. No, I warned him, but he wanted to inherit the violence, not the mask. That's not discipline. That's stupid. It wasn't a renunciation. It was a dismantling. Diane did not respond with interviews. It wasn't necessary. The next morning he found a small box on his doorstep, no sender. Inside, a police badge broken in half. Attached to it was a sticky note. You held the line. Now hold this. Dr. She didn't cry. He didn't smile. He simply held the cracked metal in the palm of his hand and murmured, I don't keep relics. I bring reminders. That afternoon, under the cloudy skies of Cleveland, Diane Voltu at Cleveland Heights High School. He entered Justice Hall. The exhibition was still shining, untouched, sacred. She bowed down before Maya's photo. With a nail and a piece of wood, he attached the broken badge just below the image. On the sign, he wrote by hand, Song of the Broken Badge. No security guard stopped her. No student asked. The gesture did not require authorization because history had already authorized it. And as she left in silence, in another city, a man wearing a cap on his lower face was pushing a shopping cart. Captain Hartwell. A student saw him in the refrigerated aisle, another one in the frozen food category. Nobody said his name. No one came near. They simply recognized him and retreated, not out of fear, but by refusal. He was exiled in real time, surrounded by knowing eyes and by feet that refused to share the same ground. Captain Hartwell sent resumes everywhere. Private security companies, correctional rehabilitation centers, university patrols. But the videos had gone further than his name could hide. Each human resource recognized the voice, the phrase, the face. Every email he sent went unanswered. Until finally, the phone rang. It was Officer Gerald Hartwell. Vincent, now simply Hartwell, answered immediately. The voice on the other end was hoarse, trembling, tired. I gave up my retirement to protect you. And I would lose again, because now they know what we were. They saw it. Hartwell remained silent. The father hung up. In Cleveland, the parents who visited Justice Hall. They walked more slowly in front of the new addition to the exhibition. Some stopped, others whispered, others just stared. A mother placed her hand on her son's shoulder and said in a low voice, "This is what happens when someone holds power without the truth." Diane did not return to school that week. It wasn't necessary. The broken badge remained there, without shine, without polish, but untouchable. And every day a student would pass by, he would stop and look, because broken metal cannot be erased. He reflects, and when the next rain came, the badge didn't shine. It rusted, slowly, openly, publicly, like the man who once used it. The broken badge still hung beneath Maya's face when the invitation arrived. A white envelope with gold details, sealed with the coat of arms of the state of Ohio, not addressed to Diane, but Mrs. Diane M. Reeves, honored by the civil rights movement. She did not hesitate. He didn't smile. She folded the invitation and put it in the drawer, next to Maya's drawings from her kindergarten days. And he said nothing until the day arrived. The Ohio State House was packed. All seats are occupied. The corridors were filled with anticipation. The cameras weren't filming a celebrity. They were filming a wait. She went in alone, without a delegation, no prepared speech. He was wearing the same worn coat he had worn the day he installed the school's digital display. When his name was announced, the applause echoed like thunder. She didn't wave. He waited for the silence to return. And then he said, "I'm not a good person." Sighs, hands covering mouths. "I didn't come here to be thanked. I came because I refused to keep failing. I didn't wake up one day and decide to speak. I spoke up because my silence almost killed my daughter." That's not courage. The room froze. "I'm not here to inspire anyone. I'm here to remind you that people don't break all at once. They are gradually erased. And she placed her hand on the podium. I'm tired of seeing rubber become the order of the day. He looked at the audience. I'm not your hero. I am your consequence. The audience stood up. The applause came like a storm. She did not bow. He didn't even blink. He turned around and left through the same door he had entered. Backstage, a teenage girl approached with a notebook in her hands. Mrs. Reeves, I want to be like you. She smiled slightly, touching the girl's shoulder. No, my dear. You don't want to be like me. You want to go further than I have gone. I've been there before. Outside, the streets were bustling with activity. Murals were being painted. Artists painted portraits. A proposal to erect a statue in his honor went viral. A reporter asked in passing whether she would support the idea. Don't put me on a pedestal while I'm still breathing. It's very easy to bring me down. Days later, a national political party invited her to run for public office. The letter was formal and polite. His leadership is what the country needs, she replied to the hand. I'm not here to win seats. I'm here to turn the tables. The letter was never read aloud, but it was framed. The tribute check sat on the table for 2 days. When she finally signed it, it wasn't for a foundation, not even for an NGO, more for the Maya Reeves Justice Fund, created to support students who have been unfairly suspended, and to guarantee free legal assistance for children silenced by protocols. She did not attach a ticket. The receipt simply said, "This is not a donation. It's a refund." Finally, the letter arrived at the Cleveland Police Department headquarters. She wasn't angry, it was not accusatory, she was methodical. Not all of you were wrong, but you all remained silent, and silence, when placed between a child and a truncheon, it's not neutrality, it's permission. She signed it. Good luck with the paper, and she never sent a copy to herself. The morning after the letter was never returned, Justice Hall was silent. There were no students in the hallways, no cameras, no speeches. Only the distant sound of rain running down the old gutters of Cleveland Heights High School. The lights on the digital dashboard were still pulsing slowly, one name at a time, each letter lighting up as if breathing. Among them, Maya's. One of the school's most senior employees arrived before everyone else. He saw something different. On the ground, in front of the corner of the broken badge, there was a yellow envelope. No address, no signature, just one handwritten sentence. Every truth needs witnesses, even when they are silent. He looked around. Nobody. He put the envelope in his pocket, feeling that it didn't belong to him, but also knowing that I couldn't leave him there. Later, when he opened it, he found a small USB drive inside, the same template used in Diane's files years earlier. Inside it, there was only one recording, a woman's voice reading names. No noise, no soundtrack, just the voice. 12 names, one by one. Each pause between them was long enough to hold an entire lifetime. That afternoon, the school was overrun with visitors, former students, mothers, retired teachers, young people who never met Maya. Everyone came. They said they wanted to see where it all began, but deep down, they knew they were supposed to listen to what was left. The screen started playing the audio from the USB drive automatically, as if the system knew what to do. The voice echoed down the hallway, and for the first time, nobody spoke. Some wept silently, others closed their eyes. A child held her mother's hand and asked, "Why is she reading the names so slowly?" The mother replied in a trembling voice, "Because respect also has its time." That same night, Diane was at home. The wind passed through the curtains, carrying the damp smell of wet earth. On the table, the same battered notebook that had accompanied her to court. She opened it to the last page and wrote, "When they called me Mother Courage, I wanted to laugh. Courage is not what remains when fear disappears. That's what you do while fear is breathing down your neck. I just kept going, and to continue sometimes is the purest form of resistance. He closed his notebook, stood up, and turned off the lights. There was no need to keep watch over the past anymore. The past, finally, was watching over her. Months later, Justice Hall was designated a historic and educational landmark of the state of Ohio, not as a monument to grief, but as a living archive of remembrance. No politicians gave a speech at the ceremony. No red carpet was rolled out. Just students, in different uniforms from different schools. They read aloud, in chorus, the inscription placed at the main entrance. Here we don't celebrate anyone's victory. Here we remember the price everyone paid for the silence. The audience fell silent, and a gentle breeze passed through the aisle. Moving the sheets of paper stuck to the wall, the photos, Maya's drawings. The broken badge was already covered in rust, but nobody dared to remove it. Rust, they said, was the testament to time, and time, the only justice that never fails. 2 years later, the daughter of a former student opened the Maya Reeves Justice Fund in a small room in downtown Cleveland. In the first month, they received 7 requests for legal assistance. In the third, 54. On the first anniversary, more than 400 cases of students being unfairly suspended or punished were reported. They were reversed based on documents inspired by Diane's original archive. On the wall of the headquarters, a phrase painted in blue. Memory is not a mirror. It's a lighthouse. One morning, a photographer from the local newspaper went to the school. He wanted to capture the panel in the light of dawn. He waited for the sun to hit the windows, but he realized that the light wasn't coming from outside. It came from within, reflected in the white letters that blinked softly against the black background. The lens captured an unexpected image. The reflection of an elderly woman standing at the end of the corridor, observing the panel in silence. There was no way to tell if it was Diane, or simply the echo of someone who had already passed through there. The photograph won the State Photojournalism Award that year. The title he gave it was simple: As long as there is light, there will be remembrance. Some time later, the press quietly announced the death of Diane Reeves. No reasons revealed, no public ceremonies. The news was small, but it spread quickly. In less than 24 hours, the city walls were covered with a single phrase, painted by different hands, in different neighborhoods. She didn't leave. She simply rested her voice. At Cleveland Heights High School, no one has announced any official mourning. The students decided on their own what to do. The following morning, they lined up and sat on the floor of the main hallway. For an entire hour, nobody spoke. Nobody used their cell phone. The only sound that could be heard was that of breathing. And then, when the clock struck 9, one of the students stood up, opened the digital display, and typed a phrase that still shines there to this day, engraved in white letters, eternal as the rust of the badge. Here, no child will be erased. Because a mother taught the world to remember. That night, as the city lights went out one by one, a final recording from Diane's archive was broadcast on PBS Ohio. Her voice, older but still firm, said, "Justice is not an act. It's an echo. And memory, when it echoes, needs no forgiveness. She just needs to continue being heard." The last words were almost a whisper. "I left nothing behind. I just left the path lit." And so, amidst echoes and silences, between rust and light, between pain and permanence, the story of Diane Reeves. It transformed into what she always wanted it to be, not a memorial, but a vivid reminder that forgetting is the first accomplice of all violence. And as long as there is someone to read Maya's name, as long as there is a child with the courage to ask, why? While the sound of a mother echoes in the background of a school, the truth will remain standing. even if the world once again tries to kneel before oblivion. If this story has reached you, it's because the memory is still alive, and because each of us carries the responsibility of not letting silence win again. The voices that were silenced yesterday continue to echo today, in classrooms, on the streets, in the conversations we avoid, and in the truths that insist on returning. Diane Reeves' story is not just about a mother. It's about what happens when someone decides to transform pain into a record and oblivion into denunciation. Now I want to know from you, where are you watching from? Each city, each voice and each gaze form the same chorus, that of those who refuse to forget. If this story touched you, made you think, reflect, or feel outraged, please share it. Leave a comment telling us what impressed you the most. And if you want to continue following stories that make time stand still and consciousness awaken, like this video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because remembering is the first step to change. And as long as there are those who watch, question, and speak out, the truth will never be alone.